Every ancient culture on Earth built labyrinths, and they all built the exact same one. The same winding, seven-circuit design appears in Bronze Age Crete, in Celtic rock carvings in Ireland, in the desert petroglyphs of the Hopi Nation in North America, and in temple art across ancient India, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. No trade routes connected these civilizations at the time these structures appeared. No shared written language, no documented contact. And yet the design is mathematically identical across all of them. This is not a theory, not a fringe claim. It is one of the most genuinely puzzling facts in the entire archaeological record, confirmed by mainstream scholars who study prehistoric symbolism. In the next 16 minutes, we are going to walk through the real history of ancient labyrinths, their origins, their architecture, their cultural meaning, and the genuine mystery of why disconnected civilizations kept building the same structure. We will cover the oldest known labyrinth carvings in the world, the geometry that makes this design so extraordinary, the largest labyrinthine structure ever built in the ancient world, and what archaeologists actually understand about why these structures were built. Because the real story is far stranger than most people realize. Let us start at the very beginning, with what the word itself actually means. The word labyrinth is one of the most linguistically mysterious terms in Western civilization. It appears in ancient Greek texts, but most philologists believe it is not Greek in origin at all. It likely comes from the Lydian word labris, meaning double axe, a sacred symbol found everywhere in Minoan Crete. So labyrinth most likely meant the house of the double axe, and the structure was named after the most powerful religious symbol of the civilization that built it. The oldest labyrinth designs we have found are not buildings, but carvings, petroglyphs cut into rock faces that have survived for thousands of years. A carving at Lausanna's in Sardinia, Italy, has been dated to approximately 2500 BCE, making it one of the oldest known labyrinth representations anywhere in the world. Similar designs of comparable age have been found in Portugal, in Ireland near the Boyne Valley, and at Indus Valley civilization sites, all of them using the same seven-circuit structure, all of them appearing within roughly the same historical window. What makes this genuinely puzzling is not just that the design is similar, it is that the design is mathematically specific. The classical labyrinth can be constructed from a simple algorithm. Start with a cross, add 4 L-shaped angles and 4 dots arranged around it, and connect them in a specific sequence of curves. Anyone who begins drawing nested curves around that seed pattern will arrive at the same complete design, which helps explain how it could be independently discovered by people who never met each other. The mathematical elegance of the pattern is self-reinforcing. Once you start constructing it, the design almost completes itself, and the result is always the same seven-circuit single-path structure. This is what scholars mean when they describe it as independently discovered. Not that it happened randomly, but that the underlying geometry made the discovery almost inevitable for any culture experimenting with this type of symbolic drawing. The design has one entry point, one center point, and a single path that winds back and forth through all 7 circuits before arriving at the center, meaning you cannot get lost inside it, because there are no branching paths and no dead ends. This structure, unicursal, meaning single path, is critical to understanding what these structures were actually used for, because a path you cannot get lost in is not a puzzle or a trap. It is a journey. Now let us talk about the most famous labyrinth in the ancient world, the one that gave the concept its name and its mythology. The Cretan labyrinth, according to Greek myth, was designed by the master craftsman Daedalus and built beneath the palace of Knossos to contain the Minotaur, the half-human, half-bull creature born to Queen Pasiphae. The Athenian hero Theseus, sent as one of 14 young people to be sacrificed to the Minotaur, was given a ball of thread by King Minos' daughter Ariadne, unspooled it as he walked in, killed the Minotaur, and followed the thread back out. The real palace of Knossos was excavated beginning in 1900 by the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, and what he found was a genuine Bronze Age Minoan palace with an extraordinarily complex multi-story floor plan, hundreds of rooms, interconnected corridors, storage magazines, ceremonial spaces, and staircases spreading across multiple levels. To someone walking through it without a map, it would feel genuinely labyrinthine, overwhelming, confusing, impossible to navigate without guidance. Evans himself believed the palace's complexity inspired the legend, and this remains the mainstream scholarly interpretation today. However, the palace itself is not a single-path maze and contains no dedicated structure identifiable as a containment space. Evans's reconstruction of Knossos, completed with significant quantities of reinforced concrete added by his team, has itself been a subject of debate. Some of the iconic frescoes are largely modern reconstructions built from very small original fragments, and critics argue that Evans's prior conviction that this was the labyrinth of legend shaped some of his interpretive choices. The archaeology of Knossos is real and remarkable, but the image of the palace many people carry comes partly from Evans's reconstructive vision rather than purely from what survived. Now here is something most people have never heard of: the largest labyrinthine structure ever built in the ancient world, and it was not in Crete. Adjacent to the pyramid of Pharaoh Amenemhat III of Egypt's 12th dynasty, built around 1860 BCE near the site of Hawara in the Fayum region, there stood a structure so enormous that both Herodotus and Strabo, two of the ancient world's most widely traveled writers, said it was more impressive than the pyramids themselves. Herodotus visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, and described a vast complex of 12 roofed courts connected by thousands of chambers, extending both above and below ground, reporting that it took an entire day to tour just the above-ground portion. He claimed the below-ground sections were inaccessible to foreign visitors because they contained the tombs of kings and sacred crocodiles. Modern excavations at Hawara, carried out by Flinders Petrie in the 19th century, and continued by more recent Polish-Egyptian research teams, have confirmed a massive foundation complex extending approximately 250 by 300 meters adjacent to the pyramid. But the superstructure was so thoroughly quarried for building materials in later centuries that very little of it remains above ground. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest significant underground components still exist, unexcavated, beneath the site. What was built here was real, it was enormous, and its full story has not yet been recovered. Now let us look at what these structures were actually used for, because the evidence across cultures points consistently toward the same categories of purpose, none of which involve supernatural containment. In pre-Christian European cultures, labyrinthine patterns are consistently associated with processional ritual, the physical act of walking a winding path inward toward a center, symbolizing a journey through complexity toward resolution, death, and rebirth, or the initiation of the individual soul into a new stage of life. The Scandinavian tradition of Troy towns, stone labyrinths built on coastal clifftops and beaches across Scandinavia and the Baltic coast, with hundreds of examples still surviving today, was associated with fishing communities performing rituals to secure favorable winds and safe returns from the sea. Among the Tohono O'odham people of the Sonoran Desert and their Hopi neighbors, the same seven-circuit design appears on pottery, basketry, and petroglyphs, associated with a figure called Airoi, or the Elder Brother, a powerful spirit connected to the winding path of human life and the emergence of humanity from the earth. The design they use is nearly identical to the classical Mediterranean version, a fact that has generated serious scholarly attention, with most researchers concluding it represents independent discovery of the same elegant mathematical structure rather than any form of ancient contact. In medieval Christianity, the labyrinth became a devotional tool, and the most famous example of this transformation is the labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral in France, laid into the nave floor around 1201 to 1220 CE. The Chartres labyrinth has 11 circuits rather than 7, an elaboration of the classical design that still retains the fundamental unicursal single-path structure. Pilgrims historically walked the Chartres labyrinth on their knees as a symbolic substitute for the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, a full sacred journey compressed into a 30-foot diameter circle of stone. The measurement ratios between circuit widths in the Chartres design approach the proportions of the golden ratio in certain analyses, though whether this was a deliberate design intention or an emergent property of the geometric construction method used is still debated among architectural historians. Modern research has taken the labyrinth in a direction none of the ancient builders could have anticipated: controlled psychological studies. Research examining the effects of walking a labyrinth found measurable reductions in anxiety, blood pressure, and cortisol levels in participants who completed a labyrinth walk compared to control conditions. This suggests a genuine physiological relaxation response to the focused, repetitive, physically enclosed walking pattern, And it may be the closest we can get scientifically to understanding why people across thousands of years of different cultures kept building and walking these things. The experience of following a single winding path with no decisions to make, no wrong turns possible, and a guaranteed arrival at the center appears to produce a specific and measurable calming effect on the human nervous system. The work of the Reverend Dr. Lauren Artris of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, who installed a walking labyrinth there in 1991 after studying the Charter's design, catalyzed a worldwide revival of labyrinth walking. Today, there are thousands of labyrinths installed in hospitals, hospices, retreat centers, parks, schools, and churches around the world, designed specifically for the psychological benefit of walking them. So what do we actually know about why the same design appeared across disconnected ancient cultures? The most honest answer from mainstream archaeology is that the classical seven-circuit labyrinth design is what mathematicians call an emergent pattern, a structure so geometrically elegant and so naturally derivable from simple drawing experiments that multiple cultures, independently experimenting with nested curves and symmetry, arrived at it separately. The design is, in a sense, latent in the geometry itself, waiting to be discovered by anyone who starts drawing in a particular way. What the cultures that discovered it then did with it varied by their own religious and cosmological frameworks. Some made it a ritual walk, some a pilgrimage symbol, some a protective mark, some a story about a monster in a maze. But the underlying structure they all kept was the same. A single winding path, one entrance, one center, no wrong turns, and a guaranteed journey from the outside world to the still point at the heart of the design. That consistency across 4,000 years and every inhabited continent on Earth is not a mystery that requires a supernatural explanation. It is something rarer and more interesting. It is a clue about something deep and how human minds respond to a particular geometric experience. And we are still piecing together exactly what that something is. If the hidden geometry of ancient structures is the kind of puzzle you want to keep pulling on, the next video goes somewhere the archaeology gets even stranger, and the evidence is just as solid.